Hello and welcome. We're delighted to have you here for our reading with our two authors, Larry and Laura. And oh, there is Sonia. We will have a quick introduction of our two authors, just so you know who they are and what their writing background is. And then obviously that's what you're all here for. Both of them are going to read an extract from their book. And afterwards, we're going to have a little Q&A session. So if there are any questions that come up now during the introduction or later during the reading, please feel free to ask them. And and then we will go into a little wrap up. I would say, let's start with a quick introduction. Laura, Lauca, her artist name is. She's a European writer. She is based in Berlin and she has been there since 2011. And before that, she has actually been on quite a journey, very cosmopolitan lady. She's lived in China, she's lived in Spain, Belgium, and France. And she started writing and publishing micro stories on her website. That were her first steps into writing or published writing. Those micro stories are brief stories and they are normally inspired by everyday life. And then she decided that micro stories is not enough. And then she sat down and started writing her own first novel, Returning East is the title. And it draws a lot of inspiration from Chinese history, but also her own adventures across China and her time in China that she spent there. Laura, am I right, or do I remember that correctly, that it was 5 years that you lived there?
I think in total was 6.
Well, in total was 6, okay, yes. And she says that her writing reflects her interest in foreign languages, as well as crossing cultures. So really showing her love for multiculturalism. And Laura, is there anything that you would like to add?
Thank you, Patricia, for this introduction. And of course, hello to everybody. Thank you for being here. I think at the moment I don't have much to say. Probably will add a little bit more when it will be my turn to read from my book.
Okay. A little fun fact about you?
Oh, fun fact. I am a very busy person, but I don't know if that's fun. I am currently not only writing my second novel, but I'm also a Qigong teacher, and I started studying traditional Chinese medicine, and just to stay, in the topic of China. And yeah, that's very interesting. And at the moment, I am actually spending my weekends just looking at pictures of tongues, because according to traditional Chinese medicine, the diagnosis on the basis also of the tongue color, shape, and so on. And I can tell you, some tongues are really not nice to see, but these are my weekends.
Okay. The lady of many interests. Thank you very much. And then we have our second author as well, which is Larry Feign, and he's actually an award-winning artist, and he is not new to writing. He's the author of numerous books about China, and he's also written best-selling children's books, a whole series, and his pen name is M.D. Whalen. Larry was born in New York, and he has spent most of his life actually living in Hong Kong, as well as, and it's a similarly long list to Laura's, Germany, England, and Portugal. A man well-traveled. And for over 30 years, he lived walking distance from a notorious pirate havens on an island in the South China Sea. And the first he heard the legend, that's where he first heard the legend of the notorious woman pirate from an old Chinese sailor. So also his writing inspired by his experience, obviously, in China. The novel that he's going to read from is, again, not his first novel, but his first adult novel. So, you know, a little bit or something a little bit new to him as well. Larry, is there anything that you want to add to that?
Well, a trivial fact about me is my birthday is the same day as Walt Disney, Little Richard, and the late King of Thailand. So it seemed, I tell people that I was destined either to be a monarch or a rock star or a cartoonist, and cartoonist seemed easier. And so that's what I did for about 20 years was cartoons.
Okay, perfect. So I would say, again, you kind of know a little bit about the two authors now. And I would say then let's go to the main part of our reading, which is the reading. And Laura, do you want to go first?
I think I will let Larry go first.
Okay, good. That's fine. Larry, the stage is yours.
Okay, well, I'm going to read a little bit from The Flower Boat Girl, my novel about the uh, successful Chinese pirate, Cheng Yatso, who's known more online as Zheng Yi Sao. That's the difference between the Cantonese pronunciation of her name and the Mandarin pronunciation of her name. And she was from the Cantonese speaking community, the boat people community in South China. So she spoke Cantonese. So I used the Cantonese versions of the names of all the characters in this book. It's based on many years of research. As you just heard, I lived for many years on Lantau Island, part of the Hong Kong archipelago, where these pirates had their base. And I heard about her and became fascinated by this story. And without really having a goal of writing a book, I began researching it for about 8 years. On the side, while I was doing other work, I would spend all my free time going through old documents and manuscripts and walking around and looking at landmarks and learning from boat builders and doing everything I could to find out this story. And I always wondered, why had no one written a book about her? For 200 years, this story has been kind of hidden in plain sight, and there's no book about her in Chinese, in English, in Portuguese, any other language. And it became kind of clear to me that it was my destiny to have this project fall in my lap. And so I decided I'm going to go all the way and write what I consider to be the definitive book about her life. I wrote it as a novel because I became interested in what drove this woman who came from a very poor background to eventually become a very powerful pirate. What was her personality? And the more I learned about her, the more a picture of her personality kind of formed for me. And for that reason, with all the research I had, I decided not to write a straightforward biography, but to write a novel which would allow me to tell the story and to explore her character. I'm going to read the opening of the book, the opening part of the opening chapter, to give a little bit of an idea of her origins, basically.
Sorry,
And
Larry, just one thing. Make sure that your micro stays closer to you because
okay,
when you get a little bit further, the
okay,
voice comes and go. At least this is how I hear it
okay.
here.
Sorry about that. Okay, I
Now
will.
now it's perfect. Thank you.
Okay, okay. And so this action takes place in the year 1801 in southern China. And the first chapter of the book is called Magpies. And you're going to have to imagine a Chinese woman's voice narrating this. Ignore the tone of my voice, please. I'll never believe in birds, especially magpies. Listen to them, squawking and clattering on the deck overhead, like armies battling on scratchy twig feet. The same thing every day before sunset, but today they were more grating than usual. I rose from the sleeping mat and pounded the ceiling. The customer in my bed snorted and rolled onto his side, offering a view of his scar-crossed coolie's back. I dared not hit the ceiling again for fear of disturbing him and the anticipated tip. Let the birds wake him. How did magpies become harbingers of good fortune? Was it because of that story, the one my mother loved to cry over? Every year, at the height of summer, the magpies linked wings, forming a footbridge across heaven to unite a lonely weaving girl with her shepherd boy lover, just for one day. Why didn't she stay with him? I always asked. Why didn't she make the birds weave a bridge down to earth and let them both escape? Every year, my mother smiled at such questions. Oh, Yang, my blue-eyed girl, my big-eyed girl, sorry. It's because a single day of pleasure, so pure, can last an entire year. Besides, we want to tell the story again next summer. It was that time of year right now, the 26th summer of my life. Where was my bridge away from this place? Where was my shepherd? The magpies cackled back. Ha! Not for boat girls, not for whores, certainly not for you, Shek Yang. Faraway drum beats scattered my thoughts. They sounded like fishermen beating pigskins to herd fish into nets. But this was neither the right time of day for it, nor their usual slow, steady pulse. This tempo was hurried and uneven, a palpitating heart. I draped a shawl over my shoulders and stepped to the porthole, rested my chin on folded arms, and stared out at my world. 8 wooden huts hovered on stilts over the hard mud, same as they always had. The beached junk at the end hadn't been there when I was sold away as a child. Now it looked as parched and worm-ridden as this old boat, the one my young body paid for, now my hollow haven. Beyond, the mud flats stretched out forever, empty except for an old woman on a skid gathering mud skippers, and the girl with her clam bucket who I'd found squatting in the cabin when I returned after 13 years away. A fluttering sea breeze chilled my sweat. The air tasted of iron and salt. A storm was coming. The fish would be swimming deep. Then why had the fishermen's drumming grown louder, more erratic? In a paddy field somewhere, buffaloes moaned, pigs whined, dogs barked back, the magpies chattered. I'd forgotten how noisy this place could be. I'd forgotten many things about Sun Wui. As a little girl, this narrow inlet had seemed like a wide open gulf, big enough to swallow the world. I'd forgotten the stench of fish on everything, every plank, every stone, the salt, sour taste in the air from shrimp drying on racks. And the mud, always the mud. Black and squishy at water's edge, but scouring young fingers when they dug down for clams. Spreading inland, the mud turned coarse, pockmarked with stones and crab holes, but never dry enough to earn the name dirt, never letting go of whatever it sucked in. Boulders, driftwood, my father's stranded fishing junk. Nobody knew where he was, where he'd gone, or whether he was even still alive. Nothing was left of him, my mother, or the family we'd once been in this rotting carcass of a vessel. Not a strand of rope, not even a familiar stain on the deck. This hollow hulk that he'd traded my young life for had been abandoned by its spirits. The clam girl splashed through a pool in the mud, swinging her bucket, stooping to examine something that caught her eye. I turned my head away, but too late. The memory flooded in. Years and years ago, another little girl had set down a clam bucket in nearly the same spot and picked up a dazzling red scallop. I'll give this to my new baby brother or sister, due any day now, I'd thought. I remembered shrieking with laughter when a hermit crab popped out a claw and tickled my hand before I set it down and it scurried away. I'd clung to this memory through the years on the flower boats, always recalling that last perfect moment of my life before. But I always stopped there, humming, shouting, anything to block out what came next. The blood across this very cabin's floor. No, I couldn't bear the thought, not even now. Everything suddenly went quiet, like the world holding its breath. No drumming, no birds, no breeze. The air weighed on my head. The shawl whipped off my shoulders. A rough hand seized my breast. His breath filled my ear. Again. My revulsion was tempered by the thought of his purse. Another copper cash toward the cost of a proper boat. Something for once that was mine. Need to pay 2 times, I said. First one too quick. Not my fault, dear. Composing my best working smile, I half turned to him as something caught my eye. A ship crept past the headland, a stout 3-masted creature of nearly black wood, sails tinted red by the setting sun. I would have taken it for an Eatwater coastal trader if it hadn't been for an unusually tall deckhouse at the rear. It swung into the inlet. I was stricken by its bulging, painted eyes. It didn't belong here. Local Guangzhou vessels rarely had eyes carved onto the bow, and Fukienese ones were round, but these were high and elongated, squinting like a tiger preparing to bounce. The coolie tugged my arm. You hear me, you bitch? I said, fine, pay twice. 2 ships, now 3, all with tiger eyes. Other than that, they really were nothing more than tattered old junks. Whatever they'd come for didn't concern me unless they sought the kind of refreshment that I offered for cash. Meanwhile, I had an impatient customer to appease. This time he took more pleasure in making me earn my money than in the act itself. Skillful handwork was required to prime him into shape. Then he climbed on from behind and grunted and growled like a bull in rhythm with the fisherman's drumming, his cue swinging past his shoulder into my face with every thrust. I made the necessary noises while picturing a treat for afterwards. Slices of fresh roast pork, or a bowl of sweet bean curd, or maybe his tip would cover both. A sharp knock at the cabin door so startled me that I nearly bucked him off. He squealed in pain. Ah, Yang! It was the little clam girl. She pounded louder. What did she think she was doing? The stupid girl knew she was never ever to disturb me when I was working. Hadn't I been kind to her, given her the forward hold, always sharing rice in exchange for a handful of clams? How dare she interrupt? The latch jumped from the slot and the door creaked open. I screamed, "Get out!" The coolie threw himself off, smacked his head on a low beam, and danced into his trousers. Not you! I lunged for his leg, but he slipped away. Wait! You pay money! He nearly trampled the girl on his way out. My money, you turtle egg! Pay me! I almost crushed the girl myself as I stumbled through the doorway, pulling on my crumpled clothes. By the time my tunic was half buttoned, he was already bounding behind the fishing huts toward the paddy fields. See what you did? I grabbed the clam girl's muddy shirt and dragged her out to the deck. Tears and sweat mixed on her face. The unmistakable crack of a musket shot singed the air. Magpies surged from the poop deck, forming a shrieking black cyclone overhead. With a high-pitched burst, they scattered toward the darkening hills. The girl grabbed my arm and pointed across the seaward rail. I counted 5 junks. No, she said, I said pirates, the girl said. I counted 5 junks. Men clambered over the rails into sampans. Others jumped straight into the water. With the low sun behind them, they looked like cutout figures in a shadow play. No one ever told me what to do in the event of a raid. Were they here to plunder? To murder? What would they do to women and girls? Run, I yelled. Back in the cabin, I flung open my storage chest, pulled out my best silk tunic, and grabbed a padded vest. What else to keep out of their hands? I sifted through a small pile of trinkets, hairpins, copper bracelets, a dented mirror, the pathetic vestiges of my former life. Let the bandits have them, all except an ivory comb which I tucked snugly into my hair. I dragged the sleeping mat aside, reached under a loose floorboard, and removed my money purse with its reassuring metallic rattle. The girl screamed from the doorway, "Ah, Yang, they're coming!" "Don't wait for me! Go! Run!" I stretched my hand deeper into the gap until it found the slippers. The embroidery caught on a splinter until I freed them with a gentle tug. Only a few threads damaged. I pressed the soft silk to my cheeks, as if they might still hold some residual warmth from my mother's feet. I threw on the tunic and vest, stuffed everything else into pockets, ran onto the deck, and without stopping, made a flying leap onto the hard mud below. And that's where I'm going to stop.
Thank you very much, Larry. That was, hang on, we've got a little reaction here. There we go. Thank you very much. That was inspiring. It gave us a really, really nice insight. Yeah, I would say we let that settle for a second. And Laura, you can get ready. We're going to go straight to Lauca for her reading of her little extract from her book. Laura, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Patricia. So I just wanted to show a little bit the picture. Well, here is an author copy, so there is this line, but there is a junk. And I wanted to start actually by reading the blurb that you can find also on Amazon, just to give a little bit the idea what the story is about. So it takes place in France in 1954. My protagonist is called Jean-Jacques, but throughout the book, the name is actually just indicated as JJ. So it's, let's say, its nickname. JJ boards the ocean liner Cambodia towards Hong Kong and Shanghai, bound to a light-hearted promise he made his dying calligraphy teacher. On board, he meets Fred, who adds lightness to the voyage. JJ longs for connection and yields to Fred's pleas to explore Hong Kong together. But when JJ and Fred miss their ship to Shanghai, JJ's fear of repeating the past spurs him to agree to a shady art deal to keep his promise and his new friend. The journey turns into a law-breaking odyssey, which will cast a new and unexpected light on JJ's past and shape his future. So, Patricia, you first asked me whether I wanted to add something to my presentation, and as everybody can hear, I am not English mother tongue. So I decided to write in English. My micro stories are also in English, but definitely my accent is not. So I hope you will be able to still understand me. For tonight's reading, I chose to read a few passages, not from the beginning of the book, but from more or less, not the middle, let's say halfway. And this is when JJ and Fred are in Hong Kong. They arrive by ship and they just go into to the city and visit. And I chose these passages mostly because as the reading is called Awesome Asia, I just wanted to have some representation, some descriptions of the city. Cars and trucks were parked along the pavement. On the road, bicycles fought with red and green rickshaws, and cars had to share the road with trams and double-decker buses. The endless crowd of people was matched by the countless signs hanging from the buildings or glued to pillars. JJ noted the sheer number of characters on display could have filled a whole calligraphy book. Fred, if you keep turning your head like that, it will twist off your neck. I know, my head is spinning. Have you seen that man? He's wearing pajamas right in the middle of the street. JJ looked at the man in loose trousers and jacket, whose fabric and pattern could indeed have fit in the pages of a décret catalogue in the nightwear section. Elderly ladies wore long black dresses that were tight on the body and had a slit on the side. Some wearing a shorter version, ending after the waist, paired with large trousers that stopped at the ankles. Cone hats were as widespread here as among the coolies JJ and Fred saw in the Saigon harbor. JJ and Fred turned into a market's side street overflowing with shoppers, vendors selling their wares, suppliers, and onlookers. Goods were kept in a myriad of straw baskets, giving the two friends the impression that the street was narrower than it really was. Some stalls had flat wooden planks on which their merchandise was displayed in strange combinations. Now and then, the two came upon open-air butcher blocks where small pieces of meat were waiting to be bought. Larger cuts of pork and beef hung on hooks for the delight of the flies and other insects. JJ and Fred saw a woman take a screaming chicken from a cage. Then, with a firm hand, she pulled its neck and chopped it with a heavy cleaver. Horrified and fascinated, they watched how the blood spilled from the open neck while the headless bird ran around, convulsions shaking its body. The laughter of the few waiting customers brought JJ and Fred back to reality, and exchanging a look, they hurried away from the scene. The Edichin street was by no means less crowded. This time, the most disparate activities filled the entire lane. JJ and Fred passed a woman having her hair styled outside, while her friends waited for her, giggling. On the right, men were having their birds trimmed. A group of elderly men were close by, all squatting around a game board. The banging of the cobbler drowned the onlookers' commentary of the game. There was even an outdoor dentist who busied himself with a patient's teeth using rudimentary tools. I am surprised one is not shouting, Fred said, showing the dentist's chair and the poor chap sitting on it. You are right. It looks like life is happening outside, in the open air and in front of everybody. No privacy whatsoever. And this is the first scene, so at the market, and this last sentence from JJ is really also what I experienced myself when I was in Hong Kong and China, and it was, much later. Then JJ and Fred go to a restaurant nearby, and this is a scene from the restaurant, because food actually is one of the main thing in the Asian culture, eating and staying together. I lived for a few years in Guangzhou, which is northern from Hong Kong, and they always say that, especially people from Guangzhou, they would eat everything with four legs except a table. Probably also Larry has heard this saying as well, because I think Hong Kong people are the same actually. So JJ and Fred sat on wooden stools at one of the round tables with no tablecloth. Fred took a chopstick from the bamboo cutlery holder, examined it, and put it back, rubbing his fingers together afterwards as if to get rid of the dust. He sniffed around without making a noise. At least here it smells like food. Is there a menu? What do you want the menu for? We can't read anything anyway, JJ said, but he still looked around to find one. He noticed the strips of paper hanging on the wall. I think the menu is written on those banners. I'm afraid I can't really understand much. Old Min never told me the character for chicken, JJ said. Next to them, two customers were eating chicken and spitting the bones out directly on the table. JJ and Fred stifled their laughter, thinking that such behavior back home would have banned them from family dinners for a while. After the customers left, a waiter collected the bones with a cloth that looked like it had not been cleaned all day, spread in the grease all over the table. JJ and Fred looked at each other, then down at the table. A split of second later, they lifted their elbows and hands from the surface, a grimace on the face. From another table in a corner, a customer cleared his throat and spit into a spittoon. Unable to control themselves anymore, JJ and Fred exploded in belly laughs. That was the most throat clearing I ever heard, Fred said. And so this is the scene from the restaurant. And again, I drew inspiration from what I experienced myself in Chinese restaurants. Then we have another passage. This happens later in the book. My protagonist JJ and Fred so miss the boat, and they are stranded in Hong Kong. They met during the day another foreigner, what we will call today an expat, Roger. And as they didn't know anybody else, they had the phone number, Roger's phone number, and they decided to call Roger. And Roger came to pick them up the day after, and he brings them to his flat. And this is a small scene at his flat, which is very interesting because there is a real detail about Hong Kong history here. And let's see if you can, if you notice it. Fred smiled. Ah, nice to be in a flat. He sniffed at his shirt. My clothes smell like fish and fried food. JJ teased him a little, but he then asked Roger if it was possible to take a bath. No, you can't. Water has been rationed for a while, and we cannot waste it with baths and showers. If you want, I collected some water in a basin, and you can use it for a quick wash. But mind you, don't spill it or throw it away afterwards. I've already used it twice, so don't expect clean water either, Roger explained. JJ saw Fred's expression change when he translated his answer. Why is the water rationed? JJ asked. Hong Kong simply does not have enough water for the entire population, Roger replied. The government is dealing with China to get some from them, but there are strong political pressures against this deal. He went to the kitchenette to prepare coffee, which he put on the table with a tin of biscuits. He noticed the young man looking at the coffee with suspicion. Why are you looking like that? You think I prepared the coffee with the same water I washed myself with? His booming laugh could have been heard in the hallway. So you missed the boat. Don't worry, there are regular trips to Shanghai. Well, we don't have money to buy tickets. I can lend you the money as long as you have your documents, there's no problem. Not sure about the schedule, but you can stay with me in the meantime. You'll have to share the couch though, he said, and use the recycled water. JJ slapped his head, all in all recalling something important. Our passports. So this is the moment also when JJ realizes that they left their documents on the ship, which is not the best option to actually cross China in 1954. So, and I think this is actually what I have. No, sorry, I still have Another short passage again with food, this time on a train. This scene comes later in the book. JJ and Fred are traveling by train to Shanghai once they manage to get into China. How they managed to get, I won't tell you, no spoilers. But there on the train, in the train, they meet another a Chinese who by chance also speaks French because he was in France for a few years. And he's not in the army, but because he has the uniform of a party member, JJ and Fred nicknamed him the General. So he's very friendly, and he wants to help them out. In that moment, the General appeared at the door with 3 boxes and chopsticks in his hands. "Dinner," he said, handing a box to each of them. Tubo looked at their surprised faces, so young and naive, much like his own when he was in France, and his heart filled with joy. He opened his lunchbox and found a large serving of white rice, thin slices of meat, and green vegetables. Tubo felt particularly pleased to have got meat full of fat and so much rice. His mouth was half full. He motioned with his chopsticks at JJ and Fred to urge them to eat. As soon as Tubo met the 2 Frenchmen, memories of his youth in France started flowing. What he remembered most was the loneliness and the sense of being lost among people he could not understand in a culture he was not familiar with. He often made awkward comments, and sometimes he went to bed hungry because he felt overwhelmed by such simple tasks as grocery shopping or cooking. The young men at least had each other, but Tubo felt a moral obligation to reach out to them, and he was sure they didn't know it was possible to buy lunch boxes on the train, or that they did not dare to. He had also brought a bottle of rice wine, which he poured into the large metal cups meant for tea. The more he drank, the redder his face, and the better he felt. A warmth radiated within him and around him, creating in his head a magical bond between him and the 2 Fahrgården. So that was the last passage that I wanted to read as a teaser. As you can see, the story is about a journey, both a physical journey, as my protagonist travels from Marseille to China, but it's also an interior journey where JJ actually discovers something about himself, about the kind of person he is, eventually the kind of person he wants to be, and also about his past. So this is what I wanted to present to you. And now, yes, I am very curious to hear your questions. You are very welcome.
Yes, okay. Thank you very much, Lauca. We've heard extracts now from both books, and I think you've all heard, yeah, I would say a love for detail and a lot of love that's gone into describing things that were important to you. Yeah, and we would like to open up the conversation now. So I've just changed the settings here, so you should be able to unmute yourselves now. So please feel free to ask questions that you might have for Larry and Lauca. Is there someone who's got something like a really burning question that came up during this reading? You can write in the chat here, so I will read it, or you can just open your microphone if you would like to. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to go first just to open up the discussion a little bit. Do you remember the first moment you decided to write this novel? What was it like? Was it like an enlightenment, or was it a process?
For me, it was a demand from my wife.
Okay.
Larry, closer to your microphone.
Can yeah, if you can lift the microphone a little bit with a hand, maybe then we can.
It was a demand from my wife because I had been I'd been fascinated with the topic of this woman pirate, and finding that the historical material about her was kind of sparse and scattered, and no one had ever written a book about her, and yet there was a lot of misinformation about her. So it was my kind of side project, just a fascination for me to research the story. And because in university I'd studied history, I could see some of the materials about her were not were suspect, let's put it that way, which just kept me wanting to research more and delve deeper and deeper into the original sources. And so I remember one evening I was sitting up late with my laptop in my lap, my wife next to me, and I discovered, I don't even remember which incident, but another fascinating incident about this woman. And I said to her, I can't believe that in 200 years, no one has written a book about her. And she said to me, don't you get it? You have to write the book. And it clicked in my head that that maybe somehow I was chosen to do this. It was not a natural thing for me. I'd been doing cartoons and animation, writing children's books. This was just a side interest, and yet it became kind of the focus of my life. And there was and so I remembered then there was a famous quote from Toni Morrison, who was a Nobel Prize winning author, American author, who said, if there's a book that you want to read and no one has written it yet, it's your duty to write it.
That's a beautiful quote.
So it was that evening when my wife said, don't you get it? You have to write the book. Okay.
Well, a big thanks to your wife then in that
from
case.
now on, that's the focus of this research.
Okay. Thank you very much, Larry. That was a beautiful story. Lauca, how about you?
So the question was whether there was something special when
Do you remember when you decided to write this novel? Was it like a one moment or like a process?
No, it was more a process, because I attended a couple of courses in creative writing, and one day I just said I want to try to write something longer, because I was writing, as I said, micro stories. I was writing, for the course, not even short stories, but short passages. And I said, I want to see whether I can write a whole novel. And I sat down and started doing some research with no plot in mind. I didn't plot anything. I had no idea. But suddenly then I found the advertisement for this shipping company, a French shipping company, Messagerie Maritime. And it was a beautiful poster with a small Chinese lady there, and or whatever Asian looking lady. It was drawn. It was not a picture in that sense. And I said, oh, maybe that could be something for me. And from there, I started creating my character, and this is why my character JJ lives from France to China.
Okay. Thank you. Jonathan, you've opened up your camera. You look like you want to ask something.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Something to ask Lauca. It's possibly my English teaching experience coming to the fore here, but the phrases that you used are Chinese. That sounds odd to me. Are Chinese what? When I was teaching English in Hong Kong, I would say that's an adjective. You need a noun. A Chinese person, a Chinese traveller, a Chinese woman. Mm-hmm. You wouldn't say an English. You wouldn't say a French.
Okay.
It just sounds odd to my ear, and it's
Okay.
not the sort of English that sounds natural. Just a comment.
Yes, definitely. I am not mother tongue, as I said. To me, writing stories, it's more important than, being perfect. I know I'm not perfect. I did my best, of course, with the book. I had, of course, an editor, and I will keep having my books, at least the longer ones, edited. But well, yes,
Yeah,
I'm not mother
yeah.
tongue.
Yes, it's always fiddly not using your mother tongue.
Yes.
Last year I was proofreading something written in Cantonese, which isn't my mother tongue, and it was just as difficult. Thank you.
Yes, finding your feet in a language that is not your native language. Absolutely. Yes. Are there questions? Are there something you've got the opportunity now? I mean, I've got loads of questions here, but I wanted to give you the chance to ask if there are any. I'll throw in another one of mine then. So how relevant is your experience in China for this book? Was it the basis? Is it like a thread that goes through the whole book? Is it everything? What would you say?
I think I'll go first here, Larry, if you don't mind. I didn't realize actually that the experience I had in China was so much relevant. I noticed later on that in a way the character arch or the story is somewhat similar to mine in the sense that I was also more or less at the same age as my protagonist when I went to China the first time. And of course, some of the feelings that, for example, Tubo also had when I read the last passage, is the same. Being in a foreign country and you don't know anybody, you don't know the culture. So definitely there was a deeper connection to the book than at the beginning, that I thought at the beginning. And of course, many of the scenes that I described were very close to things that I lived myself when I was there. And I think that Larry probably also had the similar experiences going around Hong Kong or if he has been to China.
Okay, thank you. Larry, how about you?
Well, for me, the whole project is rooted in the fact that I lived in this rural village on an outlying island for 32 years. I could speak the language, I knew the culture, I knew people in the boat people community who'd been there, for generations. And it was as you mentioned when you introduced me, it was one of these boat people who originally mentioned this story to me about the pirate woman. And so it was my own knowledge of Cantonese local culture, of Cantonese sayings, of local history, of the idiosyncrasies of some of the language, not so much the language, but sayings and proverbs and things like that, which gave me a basis to even begin researching this project. I don't think I would have ever dared taking on such a project if I hadn't been actually living in the area. Just as I wouldn't have dared writing a researched book about say on a topic based in Germany. I mean, I lived in Germany long ago, but that's a long time ago. So that's not the best example. Say South America. I wouldn't do it because I wouldn't even pretend to have any grounding in that culture. And so it really did come out of that, about largely my own interest in the local history of this island where I was living, and this island is where these pirates had a base. So, yeah,
Okay,
it was essential for this project.
is essential, yes. Okay, it's interesting, isn't it? When you own, like Lauca, like you said, when you don't realize how much it actually influences like a project, you know, or Larry, when you say it was essential for this book, your own experience. There's a question that I'm also really interested in, because you know, sometimes you hear about writing, the process of writing, and people just imagine this to be like a calling, and you know, you sit down and the words flow into the keyboard and there's the book. How true is that, and how, or is that a little bit more laborious, the writing process?
I mean, for me, I can say that it's a long answer to a question like that, and I'm not going to give a long answer. To me, I've been doing creative work most of my life, and I consider that it's like an illness.
Okay.
That writing is hard. It doesn't necessarily just flow out, and it requires a lot of revision, and it's slow. You know, you write a book. It took me, the actual writing of this book, for example, took at least 15 drafts over several years, and you can sit down and read it. If you're a fast reader, you can read it in a weekend. So it's a slow process, a few hundred words a day. So you have to be crazy, literally, to want to do this kind of work, because especially as someone who's not already well established and successful, you put a lot of work into a project. You don't know if it's going to be any good at the end, much less publishable, much less going to interest anybody else. So writing's hard, and you have to be obsessed with it, I think, in order to do it well.
Okay. Thank you, Larry. Lauca, how about you? It was your first novel.
It was my first novel, and I don't like to think that writing is hard, because it seems almost like, then it feels like pressure that you don't want to do it. No, I think I'm always quite a creative person, even though in a different way from Larry. But in my own life, I always try to find places where I could be creative. And for me, writing is just a way to express my creativity. And what I really enjoyed in this, in writing this book, is just to sit down in front of the computer and not knowing what was going to happen next. And everything is there, besides, a few descriptions that were, of course, based on my experience, but otherwise the whole story is really fully a product of my imagination. And this is what I think it's exciting in writing. But I agree that it's also something that you need to train in a way, because for example, at the moment, I don't have so much time to write as before. And I noticed that, when you sit down, you don't have words flowing in and a whole story written before in your mind before you put it on paper. No, you have to sit down and then really sift through your thinking and your words, and then try to build something that makes sense or that's interesting enough for you to write. And then, as Larry said, then what you write, it's not even sure that will be interesting for others. But it does require work, but I don't want to say that it's hard. It's required dedication and definitely also passion. I think I would rather describe the writing process as a passion in time, passion in the moment.
I should correct myself. I mean, I made it sound kind of negative, but it is hard. And I would say it's a passion or an obsession. When it really gets going well, it's euphoric. And in the end, it's deeply, deeply satisfying.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can't just sit down and say, oh, la-di-da, I'm just going to write something and it's going to be perfect. It won't happen.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Very interesting answers. What are your future plans before we then slowly go into, we've got a little surprise for all of our participants today, but before we do that, what are your future plans? Good.
Want to go first, Larry?
Okay, well, my present plans, I'm working on the sequel to the Flower Boat Girl, because that book tells the first half of this woman's story, her rise to power, and the second one tells the story of the rest of her career.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Future, I discovered a little interesting spin-off story for one of the characters who I also started to research, who has also another amazing life story, which I may, if I'm crazy enough, turn into another book.
Okay. And Lauca, how about you? What are your future plans?
I am working now on my second novel. This time it will be set partially in Berlin, where I live, and partially in Korea. Because there is an interesting historical fact, and that is that during late 60s, early 70s, there were many mine workers and nurses from South Korea who came to Germany to work. And I thought that would be a very nice connection. And I wanted to keep my stories in Asia for the time being, because I'm very passionate about Asia. And researching for the stories is always a very enjoyable part. And for this is my starting point. It's a slow progress, as I'm very busy with other things. But yes, I am working now. I finished the first draft. I'm now starting the second one, and it will take a while before it comes out.
Okay, but there is still there are still things to come.
Yes,
from you both.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, just looking at the time, we'd like to slowly but surely come to the last part of our reading tonight, but is there anything that maybe has come up while those two were talking that you still want to ask? Just wanted to give you a last chance. You can write in the chat, you can just raise your hand. Yeah, Jonathan, go for it.
Not a question, but just a comment. There's a British science fiction TV series called Doctor Who.
Oh, yeah.
1 year after Larry's Flower Girl book came out, there was an episode of Doctor Who featuring exactly the same character.
And the actress contacted me before that came out to get some information about it.
Oh, wonderful.
But there's a connection.
Yeah.
Oh,
yes, yes. Oh, wonderful serendipity. Everything.
Well, she, to give her credit, she really wanted, it was a small role, but she really wanted to do it right. And so she found my book. She contacted me. We had some talks. I helped coach her. And so, but I never saw the episodes.
No,
we have you to thank for the background detail there. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that comment, Jonathan. Okay, so I will also quickly post the link to both authors' websites and obviously their books as well. You can find them now in the chat. Okay, so if you want to do a little bit more research, if you do want to get in touch with them, any more information, there are two websites where you can research a little bit more on the books as well as our two authors. And yeah, I would say, Lauca, Larry, do you want to have some final words?
I just want to thank Larry for joining me for this presentation. And of course, also many thanks to you, Patricia, for being available to introduce us and to moderate this event. That's very kind of you. And of course, I also thank all the participants. It was very nice to see that we were not alone, Larry, me, and Patricia. And also thank you for allowing us to record the session and to post it on YouTube, so that we can also allow other people to have a look at this reading. thank you to all. And from my side, I wish you all a good evening.
I'd like to thank Laura for setting this up and inviting me, and for Patricia for kind of helping us put it together, and everyone who showed up. I know this is a really fringe topic, and so I'm happy that anyone showed up. So I really appreciate you coming here and hearing us, and I hope you found something interesting out of it. And I do wish you a good evening, or
Okay.
afternoon, wherever you are.
Okay, thank you very much for joining us tonight. And Sabrina and Uswari, if you want to contact Lauca at info@lauca.eu, and then she can organize your ebooks. And yeah, thank you from my side for being here. And I wish you a very nice evening, wherever you are in the world. And yeah, hopefully enjoy the books. Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks to all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.